I'd firstly like to thank ABARES for hosting this session, the sponsors for the session, and also Kevin Burns of ABARES kindly provided me some material which has become quite difficult to get because it's somewhat older. It's been impossible to try and prepare a paper for this session over the last week because the status has been for carbon forestry has been very similar, but the prospect has seemed to be a day-to-day proposition as things change. What I'm going to try and do here is really try and define the scope of what I'm talking about, gives you some estimates of economic carbon sequestration potential, and then show you what the current status of carbon plantings. And if there's time, I'll then talk about some regulatory considerations. I wasn't going to do the regulatory bit, but obviously with the Carbon Farming Initiative, the prospect of a carbon price, it would be remiss if there weren't some discussion of that. One of the things about the carbon forestry debate is people have been often talking at cross purposes. For example, under the definition of afforestation and reforestation within the Kyoto Protocol, you actually see a series of quite distinct forestry cases. So I've put, for the purpose of clarity, the different cases up there. Some people are trying to monetise carbon within an existing plantation estate. Others are trying to use a carbon benefit to increase the amount of a plantation estate, use it as an underpinning for future development. Some people are trying to use currently commercial species. Some people are using currently non-commercial species, hoping that they'll become commercial. Then there's carbon forestry itself, which is the special purpose design of for-purpose carbon sink plantations, which is what our company does. Then you have a series of environmental plantings, which are really put in for a variety of other points of view, again, which people are hoping for a carbon uplift from. And then there's the prospective bioenergy plantations. And in the analyses, all these different activities tend to get lumped into one, as you'll see. Probably the best, well thought through piece of analysis is done by Polglades and others at CSIRO. And what they did is got the 3PG growth model, and then they said, well, we'll ally an economics model to that and simply do some scenarios to see what might be prospective out there. And the sort of output that you get is if you have around $20 a tonne for carbon, you can potentially find 69 million hectares upon which trees might go. Quite a different cut has been done by Climate Works, which is an alliance between Monash University and the Myer Foundation, and they went right through Australia's abatement potential and looked at all what they produced. This is called a marginal abatement cost curve. You can see on the left all those opportunities in the economy in which you would save or make money if you implemented them theoretically, largely to do with energy efficiency in buildings and a few other niches. And on the right-hand side, you can see a lot of energy measures. The most expensive you can do is a carbon capture and storage plant new build. And that spot in the middle is essentially a bunch of reforestation type opportunities, which they characterise as reduced deforestation and regrowth clearing, reforestation of marginal land with environmental forest, and strategic reforestation of non-marginal land with environmental forest. So again, a whole new lexicon here trying to work out what carbon farming really is. But collectively, what you can see from this is, apart from the cheap wins in the urban sector, the cheapest form of abatement tends to come from forest-type operations. And collectively identified as the forestry sector, they estimate that it has the potential to contribute 28% of the total 2020 lowest cost emissions, delivering about 70 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent in 2020. And 70% of that opportunity is estimated to come from reforestation, and the remainder, 30%, from avoided deforestation. Garno in 2008 said there's 9.1 million hectares of land where returns would be more than $100 per hectare, more than the current land use, water interception less than 150 millimetres per year, and a permit price of $20 per tonne. Yesterday, he revised those numbers and reported not 143 megatonnes of CO2, but 750 megatonnes of CO2. Unfortunately, his definition, his explanation for the revision is less than revealing, because he said it's due to definitional issues, revisions in areas of land, or in some cases the estimated rates of sequestration, which is all the possibilities. The other very influential piece of work was ABARES work itself, done in 2008, and they just took the Treasury CPR's carbon price, again roughly at the $20 mark, and said, well, you might get 3 million hectares of timber plantings and 2.75 million hectares of environmental plantings. In my view, all these studies do is say there is potential. The problem that we have is, having moved to how much is possible, then the public and certain interested parties have said this much is inevitable. A great problem with the logic that we have in the discussion. The other problem is there's actually a whole very wide range of differing estimates and assumptions. And even at the base science level, one important scientific parameter is known as net primary product production. That single parameter itself is only known across the continent perhaps to 2 or 3 times, so there's a huge amount of variation simply in the growth potential as it's understood in different parts of the country. But it is worth then asking the question, well, what has actually happened? So I've done a bottom-up analysis of what has actually happened in Australia. People are concerned about 9.1 million hectares, and Australia has put in, optimistically, 65,000 hectares. So it's very little. We have not, and I can't count here, normal agroforestry operations on farms because we don't know why they were put in. They may have been put in for carbon or other benefits, or the hope that someone would do it. But here we have clearly, and that within that 65,000 hectares, you have some deals such as the TEPCO deal that was done for, which is 7,000 hectares ultimately was put in, and it's arguable that it's not a carbon planting because it was bought back by the state last year as a pure plantation play.